Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for being here, I appreciate it. This week I'm working on a very cool metallics piece, which is a 10 by 20 canvas with a bit of a titanium white base to begin things off with, and I'm working with a 3-color metallics but iridescent color puddle pour. And now getting things going with my first color of the day is the Black Flash by Folk Art. I find that using your darkest colors first is always, in my case, best case, because you're going darkest to lightest in your swipe colors you use. So here is some Violet Flash. And lastly, I used, of course, my favorite Blue Flash. And of course, as per most puddle pours, you typically want to go with more than one set of colors in a row, so I go back to my Black Flash, but a smaller puddle this time. And also going into some Violet on my second attempt here, wanting to make sure not to darken up that puddle too much in the middle, so I want to go with a bit of Violet Flash. Then the last, of course, will be my Blue Flash in a smaller puddle before my swipes begin. Now this week I wanted to use a bit of a different palette knife I have not used before. It's newer to me, but I've had it in my tool belt for about a month or so by Liquitex. A smaller, rounder, we'll call it paddle knife, we'll call this one. So with my swipe attempts here, it went okay, but I wasn't quite familiar with how this may swipe to begin with, so my first swipe wasn't great. Now on my second pass, I missed quite a bit of color off the beginning, so I wanted to do my best to, of course, get more color this time, and did a bit of a better job. I wanted to try to spread this color as far as possible on my white titanium base. Now for these smaller spaces, I opted for a much smaller knife that was more common to me, more of a knife I've used before plenty of times, which allowed me to just go a bit more slowly with my colors, and of course get that smaller space at the bottom of my canvas to spread the color in the bottom left corner, looking at it from top to bottom. And I felt this was more controlled compared to my new knife by Liquitex, which again is fine, but more of a matter of me getting used to the new palette knife. Okay, now to the second puddle, which will be my final puddle of this pour. Now I know I've talked about Folk Art iridescence before, and the Black Flash, Blue Flash, and Violet Flash, which are in this pour, are very cool colors to me. I find they're very pretty, but very shiny. Now, have any of you used the Folk Art brand in, let's say, the past 6 months or so, and have any feedback for me on your pours and what your experiences are with them? I find that they make great cells being metallic, and that the lacing in them is very cool. So yeah, if you have any feedback on these iridescents, drop a comment below, and I appreciate the feedback. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is I'm working with a titanium white base, which for me is not typical. I use a black oxide or ivory black for my bases usually, but for this pour, I wanted to see how the metallics reacted with this lighter base compared to usual. And looking at the playback so far, they seem to be holding fairly well, which is encouraging. So I found that in some pours previously that some color will always sink into the bottom of a black ivory, for example, where a nice gold or silver may just sink right to the bottom of your pour. But on this white titanium base, I found it stuck fairly well, and the colors on that first set of swipes, they hung around, which was really great. And now another reason why I wanted to use a white base was because I wanted to ensure that with this puddle pour, I wanted some bright metallics, which worked out fine, but I wanted to work with a bit of negative space in the middle or outsides of this pour, depending on how my swipes went. So with the kind of the valley in the middle of my white, I wanted to work with that gap and keep as much white in the middle as possible. And here wanting to kind of find out, just by doing a circular motion, where the paint on the canvas may actually be. And now initially off the beginning of just picking it up, it actually felt pretty heavy, which was mostly from the titanium white base color from the beginning. So as I began to stretch my lacing around with my colors, I found that there wasn't as much we'll call it liquid paint on the top as I'd hoped. So my titanium might have been a bit too thick, which is my fault of course, by not mixing quite as much water into my white as I needed to make sure that the top colors moved around a bit more fluidly and with a bit more ease. Now, one thing I wanted to mention was that I find that the Folk Art brand, it may be the pigments in the paint or compared to a Artist Loft or Liquitex, is just a better paint. I find that the paints don't stretch nearly as much or pull apart with your lacing once you begin to tilt in a bit more of an aggressive manner like I have, because I'm a bit light on paint, look at that, but wanting to make sure that I don't distort those cells going back and forth. But I find that Liquitex and Artist Loft don't always stay together like Folk Art does. So if you guys have any feedback on that, drop me a comment below on your experiences with lacing and formation of your cells and lacing and how things worked out. Now, as I watch back this video, one thing I really enjoy seeing is how neat the cells and lacing looks on this pour when it shifts in my pour dining room light. So I've got to maybe look into some light changes in the future, so that's for another day. But the lacing and cells in this pour, of course, they change with the color, and I thought they were very pretty, and I wanted to try to stretch them out on both sides to make them about equal and see how things shook out. And if you have come this far in the video, thanks for being here again. I appreciate you and all your support over these past 18 months or so with my channel. Thanks so much. Give me a quick like or comment below in the comment section. I would appreciate any feedback on this pour and what your thoughts are for the idea for the puddles with the white base, with the color shifting colors. What are your thoughts there? Now, going in for a bit of an overhead look of the wet result, which turned out fantastic. I always enjoy seeing these slower replays on the video back to us on how the final product kind of laid out. The lacing and the cells that this color combination and the color effect with the shifting makes is super cool. If you haven't tried an iridescent or a color shift color by Folk Art or any other pigmented company, give it a shot. They're super neat, and I think that the results kind of speak for themselves on how neat they can be. Now, I feel like the negative space of the white really broke this pour up into two parts, which I was super pleased with, and that the shine and shimmer on this pour was very cool. Now, if you have come this far, again, thank you so much for being here, and your support means the world to me. If you have enjoyed this pour, click this video here in the playlist above, and we'll see you again in the next one.